Today we really want to talk about pre-go live, which is generally the things you want to do to set up to go live. Tomorrow we'll talk more about the import, kind of the closeouts. Today I just want to talk mainly about some more uses in the system, as well as some things you can do to prepare for going live. Up till now we've pretty much been in the setup steps. We're in Sirius. We've been going through the setup steps. Most of what we're going to go through today is actually in the Go Live page. So if I click across the top, you'll see Go Live. The first thing it talks about is cleaning out your test estimates and orders. But first I want to go talk about looking at those orders and where we are. The Explorer window is really your navigational site to the entire system. So if I'm exploring companies, I can then search on my criteria for the different companies that are listed. Now you'll notice just by default we imported a bunch of companies into this record in a previous class. They are not in the system because they are only prospects and not clients. That's why they're not showing up. If we click prospects, of course they would show up. Now looking at this, we choose a particular client. There's always a sub-explorer to view orders, and it's going to list out the orders for any given company above. We are going to strip out everything based on test company. So therefore, if you have other orders in the system that are not linked to test company, they won't be deleted. Now you can have them deleted by going in and editing that company, that order, and changing the company to test company. That way it will get put into the grouping to be deleted. In the same sense, if you want to save an order for future use, right now we have no accounting functions. We really don't want any real orders in the system that are a sale, meaning have accounting function. Work in progress doesn't have some accounting functions, but really not according to your accounting system, so it's not that big of an ordeal if something is in work in progress before you go live. The other way to do it is with estimates. Estimates, of course, have no accounting function whatsoever. So if I have an order in the system that I want to get rid of, however I want to keep it there for future reference, I may clone that order, save it as an estimate, and then change the company to test company so that the original is deleted. And again, it's all based on this test company. To delete this test company, what we want to do is go into Setup and Reporting Setup. We can run a lot of things as reports. Reports can be an action as much as it can be a template. We've set some up in here under the Report Main menu. There's a group called Setup Steps Reports. Now I'm going to close out of my Explorer window just for good purpose, nothing's captured. You'll see Purge All Info Related to Test Company as one of the reports. In this report, you want to verify that your options is Create, View, and Save. Without it, it will execute it, but it won't save it, so therefore it won't actually delete them. If you have an error while running this query, please let us know. There was a version a while back that had a issue with this SQL statement. We just need to get you the new one. When we go to print this, and even though it's an action, we're going to print it, and you need to confirm it. This is really just a follow-up to say, yes, you really want to do this. And you do that just by typing in yes. And then you execute it. When it's executed, it should run. You really won't see much response. It's just going into the database and stripping those. Now if I go into Explore Orders, it should have removed everything that was related to test company, which just happened to be all the orders that were currently in this system. It also removed all payments, all orders, anything really related to this particular test company. Once we've purged the test companies, then what we want to do is go into Setup and then System Setup. There's a few different options I really want to talk about in this setup before you go live. One of them is the backup options. It is very important, of course, that you back up your database on a regular basis. Now this file path is related to the server path, so sometimes it's a little easier to set this up from the server, and what you want the file name to be. I recommend this go to a separate machine somewhere else on the network where a backup data set or a thumb drive type thing can pull it off and remove it off site. You have some options here. How many copies do you keep? So this will just store it because it stores it with the date at the end of each file name. And how many copies? This is the SQL temporary path. You shouldn't need to change this. This is just where it's doing the compiling of that information, and then it saves it back to this BAK file as the backup. Some other things we may want to look at in here, which is important at this time, is you'll see one for next numbers and invoices under order estimates. This is a good time to where do you want your orders and estimate numbering to start. I recommend you skip to the next 1,000 or 10,000 wherever you are in your other accounting system where you've been doing orders. That way when a check comes in the mail you can look at the order number and immediately know whether it was an order in your old system or the new system. You can set those by set next order number. It will never let you go backwards. I cannot go and set this order number to 500 since this is already at 1,003. Basically, so if I do orders at 10,000, I can't change my mind and go to 9. I can always go up to 11. Estimate numbers. A prefix, if you want something to put in front of the order number, you can do that. Set invoice to the order number. I highly recommend this stays the way it is, to where your invoice and order number are the same. If not, if you say it's independent, it will assign a separate invoice number from the order number at the time it is marked a sale. This can become quite confusing when you're trying to find an order later. As far as where it went, when it changed that number, and if you told a client an order number while it was in production, now it's an order, so it can create some issues. Where this is important and why it's even here is due to some internationals, especially South American countries, require an audit trail and invoice numbers always be sequential and within the monthly period, meaning I can't skip. We're using an order number. An order may not become a sale before the next order, so they're not going to always be in line in a month as far as what was a sale in that month. However, nobody requires that. Control can sort everything out just fine and easier without these two numbers. The default due time is when by default do you tell your clients to pick up their orders. Meaning if I'm going to say an order is due on Friday, I generally don't want them showing up at 8 o'clock in the morning on Friday. This is just the default time. I want all orders to validate with a minimum of $50. You might have seen this pop up and say, this order's under $50, because that's the default. You can remove that. You could also say you want all orders to have a minimum deposit of like 50%, and then it will pop up and it'll ask for that deposit as well. Of 50%, that's what it will default to. So far we've looked at Explore, we've gone and set our next company numbers. A couple of things I'd like to talk about as well is the company record itself. So far we've been pretty much putting everything under test company. We've kind of done every orders under test companies, etc. Let's take a look at the new company record, some of those options. First thing you have is their company name. Right? You can check name. This just verifies in the database that they don't already exist. All right, whether they're active or prospect, you cannot in control define whether someone is a client. A client automatically occurs when they have their first order in the system. Until then, they are a prospect. You can say they're a vendor, they're personal, and whether they have a contract or not. This is kind of independent, often for service contracts. Based off of that, are they a subsidiary of another company in the database? This allows you to link one company to another. So I could say they're a subsidiary of Test Company or any other company. Department or location, web address, their salesperson. This is the default salesperson. You can choose any salesperson, of course, in the system. And they can have two. Their industry, origins, and regions. These are marketing functions. They're very valuable once you get to use them. Now, it may take a year before you have enough input, or 6 months, to really utilize this information, but I do recommend you start tracking these things. That way, when I get into marketing, I can go and say at a specific time of year, I want to send all the schools in late July this. And that way my marketing program, I can set that up, and then July 1st it searches down all the schools that have spent over X dollar amount in the last year and send them a flyer. So it allows you to do outbound specific marketing to separate industries and then track where the business came from. That's what these are for. We then have our addresses such as billing, shipping, and you can have as many addresses as you'd like if they have different pickup locations or different ship-to locations. Their default home and fax number, PO, default tax class is going to default to your company, and if they're tax exempt. Flags automatically appear anytime you do anything with this company record. So if I write in here, do not accept any new orders, anytime someone tries to do anything with this company, it's going to pop that up and says do not accept new orders, or anything else you want it to say. Notes are notes on the company record, but they don't appear automatically. If there are things you continuously use, you can set them up as speed notes, double click on it, and it will automatically insert those notes. Similar to you can do in the estimate and invoice notes. Contacts. You can have as many contacts as you'd like per company. It's going to default. There's a position, again, not required. Blue fields are required. You'll see that last name is required. Salesperson is going to default to the salesperson on the company record. This is generally only used if you have a large company with different departments and different salespeople are dealing with different individuals within that company. Some people like to track birth dates just because it's part of their marketing. They like to send birthday notices. Their email address and phone numbers. These again would default to these company phone numbers unless I wanted it to change for this particular contact. And then you could overwrite that as well or add additional phone numbers. Currently using the same addresses as the overall company, that can be affected or add new if you wanted to put this person's home address for some reason. You can also track their financial information. This is where you store credit card information on file. So if I'm going to store a Visa on file for this client, you can fill that in and it will save it. Again, you will not necessarily see this card number again by just viewing it. It would just show you the last four by default. It is in the system at this area. Shipping is really to link just shippers to this particular company and their accounts. Notes, any additional notes for this contact. User defined fields, same as the company record. You're setting up for any custom fields you want to track about an individual contact or a company. On the overall financial up at the top, do they have a credit account? And this is for the overall company, and what their payment terms are. If they are a vendor, from this point, you can add whatever products you purchase from this particular vendor. And you can add them all at once from here going down your list. Once you've added a part to this vendor, again, you set up a different, what is your payment terms to them? Are you a cash customer or do you pay them on net 30? How you generally ship it, vendor number, account number, and then on each individual part you can add a SKU that is specific to this vendor and a cost that is specific to this vendor. And that's linking in the parts to a company. Because we've added a company, we said they're a prospect, they're also a vendor. They may be the same. They may purchase from you and you may purchase from them. Outside of on the top right, you'll see pricing level, promotion, and pricing plan. These are the same things you will see on an order, pricing level and promotion. Now, within this, you can set up a default. So if I always charge this company 10% more, because they drive me crazy, I can go ahead and set them to 110 pricing level, and then all of their orders will automatically be increased by 10%. I could also say that they're always on a discount. So I could say that they have a 10% discount. In this scenario, I'm adding 10% and then removing 10%. So I'm almost to where I was before, but showing a 10% discount on the orders. A pricing plan. I'm not going to get into real specifics here. This is something, if you need it or have a need for it, you should work with your point person. This allows you to set up a completely different pricing structure for particular clients. Meaning I can go to each product and set up a different way of pricing that product and linking it to a pricing plan. And then whenever a client uses that pricing plan, it will use that pricing for that specific product if it exists. And that's a brief on it. Again, we feel a need, we'll use it. It gets a little complicated to set up pricing plans. Not many shops use it. And that's the overall company record. If there is anything not filled out, it of course would not allow you to save it until you need to go in and select a salesperson or any of the blue fields that are required. Again, they're just a prospect, so in my Explorer window, they're just going to show up as prospects. Next thing I want to talk about are some of the options you have to turn on and off in the system. There are certain fields you may or may not want employees to see. For example, if I'm in this new estimate and I'm in a digital print product, there are a number of options as far as security rights settings, etc., that limit what people can see on this screen. Meaning, if you don't want your employees to see your bill of materials, you can remove that visibility from the product. In the same way, if I go into my cost, it shows me a cost and a margin, etc. If you don't really want your employees to be able to see those types of numbers, they can be removed. Some of them can be removed if I go to Setup, Pricing Setup, All Pricing Setup again. We've spoken about user constants as far as how they're used in some of the products. In the Universal Product options, you will see other ones as well that can turn some of these things on and off. Show cost and margin info, so if I say no to that, that will disappear from the screen and won't show you that cost and information. There are things that print work orders, such as right now, it doesn't print the material layout as far as how many up, how many across, how many sheets, etc. on every work order for every line because it takes up space. But if you wanted it to, you can just say yes here and it will turn those on. So there's some options there, like the original yes sets and originals we talked to and pricing methods. So if you wanted to always use area-based pricing and didn't want them to have the option to switch back and forth between area and cost, you could set your default and then set no here, and that way on this estimate, this option would disappear. It would just always be one or the other. Again, what kind of things you want people to be able to access and what they can't. There's one little trick I want to show because it's come up a lot as well at this time that people don't know. There is something called in the system estimate variations. And this is something some people will want to use, others may not. But I've gotten a lot of requests for it, so I figured I would show it to you. Under estimate options, there's something called variations for estimates. What this does, if I go to new estimate, it's something to think about whether you want to use before you go live. You'll see at the bottom it's added another toolbar, this add, rename, and clone. So let's go say I'm going to do some wide format print product and I'm going to do 10, right, 18 by 24, it's like we were doing before. And I want to give them a quote difference between putting this on one particular type of vinyl, but I may have two different types of Coroplast. Do they want a 4 mil or do they want a 10 mil? I don't know. So I'm going to go and choose one of them as my example. Now you'll see what I'm on is it says variation 1. because that's where I'm working. I can rename that, and we'll just say with 4 mil. Now I'm going to clone this variation, and now I have a duplicate variation, and I'm going to change that 4 mil to 10 mil. And save it. Then I'm going to rename this one to with 10 mil. I now have two completely separate estimates with one estimate number, but has two different variations of that estimate. When you print this, it's going to physically print two separate estimates. But one will say variation with 4 mil and one will say variation with 10 mil. I'm going to preview this to the screen just so that you see how it does. Okay, so my option is with 4 mil. Whatever I name that variable, and so this is my estimate with 4 mil. If I go to the next page, you'll see it's estimate 503 with 10 mil, and it gives you that variation. When I convert it into an order, it's going to want to know which variation they went with, because I can only convert one variation at a time into a specific order. So I'm going to convert that 4 mil into an order. And I have an order for the 4 mil. That estimate still exists. It's still in the system. I can go back and look at both variations and even convert the other variation if I needed to into another order. So that's kind of using variations. And something that in line with, we talked about using the multi-quantity grid a little bit before. This is kind of in line with that to give two separate options as far as how an estimate will be done, an order will be done. Other companies would have, and another way of doing this would have been just to clone the line item, give them two line items, one with the 4 mil, one with the 10 mil, and when you print the estimate, tell it not to total the lines. So then you've got two lines, they'll choose one of them, and you'll delete the one they don't want. So there's different ways of doing this, but that's one of your main options. Next thing I want to talk about is prepping your accounts a little bit. We've cleared out the companies. You're pretty much ready to go with your new orders. So I want to set up talk about our accounts and what we'll be working on a little bit tomorrow and some prep things you can do in the meantime. To begin with, if I go to my reports, financial reports, you'll see under listing a chart of accounts listing. This will give you all of the accounts that are currently in Sirius with their export account name. So I'm going to preview this to the screen. So currently we have all of these accounts, asset, liability, that are currently active in control. You'll see on the right hand side, this is the export name that is being used, and so if you're exporting it into accounting package such as QuickBooks, it is going to use these names as far as where it puts the accounts. There are certain things that do not export, meaning WIP and built will always equal the liability of orders due. So therefore they add together, and QuickBooks doesn't export them. You don't export them to QuickBooks. You could if you wanted that information, but it is basically irrelevant. They will always equal together. All of your undeposited funds, if you're using QuickBooks, you don't want to change this. You want them to go into undeposited funds. So this allows you to go through each account and see what you have to match it in QuickBooks or your accounting package. There are certain things you'll want to create new accounts for, and certain things you'll want to use existing accounts for, depending on what it is. In this case, you'll see an accounts receivable. Our account name is OOB Accounts Receivable. If you're using QuickBooks, it would just be called Accounts Receivable, not OOB Accounts Receivable. However, I would not want to necessarily put this in with my other accounts receivables that I'm using from QuickBooks yet. I want to keep those separate because for a while I'm going to have receivables in two systems. So therefore, I want a separate asset account for my OOB accounts receivable so I can track them separately. And then, of course, once your QuickBooks or your accounting package no longer has their own receivables, I may change that. Undeposited funds, of course, goes into undeposited funds. Some other accounts you may not have is customer deposits and customer credit balances, because QuickBooks doesn't, in general, have a true sense of deposit, since it doesn't have a true sense of work in process. And deposits are, of course, money on work in process instead of payment on sale. So I recommend you go through this list as far as your income accounts. Now again, you can merge them all. Like I could say, instead of each one going into its own account, they're all going to merge together into one account. And this is just a quick way of previewing the accounts that are currently there and what you might need to do in QuickBooks in preparation. And we'll talk more about these and more about the import when we get into the closeouts. This is a good prep tool. Next thing you'll want to do is start working with your staff. Once you've closed out, and actually you can do some of this before, because we talked about work in progress not really being an accounting function. So what I recommend you do is take all your orders that are in work in progress currently, and you put them in control, because that's the first thing you need to do is get your work in progress up to date. The way I recommend most people do that, depending on the quantity of orders you have work in progress, is hand them out to everyone that's going to be working in control. Give them all 10 or 20 and tell them to go put them all in the system. This will do two things. One, it'll teach them very quickly what they don't know. You know, they can go in and put in orders, and if they don't know exactly what to do, tell them to go ahead and guess, but trigger it, because y'all need to go through it together and get it right. Meaning, if I have an order come in and I absolutely don't know what to do with it, I may go ahead and throw it in miscellaneous real quick. You know, I need this, etc. I've already done it, it's in WIP. But what you want to do as the owner and the person setting this up is go back to this item and replace it with a real item at some point. So even though I said digital prints and I'm charging $100, you know, because I'm telling my employees go put the orders in. If you don't know what to do, go ahead and just throw something in there, but tag it, you know, either by making it part of its station. Like a lot of people will create a station, either an estimate or order station, which would be to be reviewed or to be checked, etc. So if I can put all my items in that aren't perfect in this particular station, then you as an owner can go back and look at them and see, okay, what's right, what isn't right. You know, was the material not there that they needed? So is that why they just threw it in? And then correct it and make it the right order, as well as it's a learning curve for them. Again, on every product, there is a couple things. There's the little video up at the top for your employees to walk through. You know, it just kind of goes through it. Do pay attention to the little question mark boxes. They can help a good bit as far as the understanding of what these mean. Things like the layout, as far as what does gap, margin, etc. mean. They just point in those directions sometimes when there are questions. They get comfortable finding their own information. And that is predominantly what you're doing to prepare to go live. Again, now that your orders are cleared out, you're putting in all your work in progress, assuming they're not already in your other accounting package. Get those caught up, and then you're really live. And tomorrow we'll talk about how to move over the accounting into accounting packages, etc. Any questions at this point?
I would just like a little clarification on area pricing.
Let's tell you, I'll just pull up a couple things if we can.
Okay. Yeah, in any roll print material or anything.
So what we're doing is we're pulling up this banner material. Now, area-based pricing may also be affected by the equipment, so I'm going to pull that up as well so we can explain those two. In my part, we have the digital vinyl rolls.
Yeah, what I would like to know is if you check this little box on the left that says printed area-based price,
Mm-hmm.
does that mean that anytime you use that product, it's going to default to area-based pricing automatically? In other words,
Okay.
why would you check that box, or do you need to check it at all?
Okay, good question. You can. There's different things. You have your default of area-based or cost-based in the system. This checkbox, you're right, is not required if you're going to set those default as area-based for all products. However, you can set up products differently by different part, meaning I want this 42-inch to default to area-based pricing and I want another one to default to cost-based pricing. That is possible. But what you need to do when we were going through pricing setup, all pricing setup, we were talking about the user constants, setting those defaults as area-based or cost-based pricing. Well, there's actually another option that we didn't talk about because I find that it confuses people in the long run. There's one called auto. So if this is set to auto, it will then use this trigger, whether it's area-based or not. If it's not set to auto, then it won't.
So if I do not set it to auto and I stay with the default cost-based pricing, but if I would like, when I'm entering an order, the ability to switch between the two.
In that scenario, this checkbox does nothing.
Oh, okay, so the checkbox does nothing. And where do I enter my pricing, though? Is it in these windows here?
Correct. Now, we're looking at the particular part. All red fields are area-based pricing.
Okay,
and
yeah.
Black and blue are kind of the cost-based and everything. Everyone needs blue.
Okay, I'm just not clear on what that little checkbox actually does still.
Okay. That is if you're setting it up to automatically, by material, determine whether it is going to be area-based or cost-based in the system.
Okay.
Yeah, what you're saying is it's by default it's cost-based, but you want to manually be able to switch to area-based. So therefore, this really is going to work whether this is checked or not for what you're trying to do.
Oh, okay. Okay,
it really
that's
doesn't.
what I
In your scenario, it doesn't matter if this is checked or not.
Okay, and so if you use that auto, would you explain what the auto is once more, please?
Sure. Auto then checks this checkbox on each part, on the main primary part, whether it should be area-based or cost-based pricing. So instead of you determining what it is, it will determine it for you. Like this cost-based and area-based, that will switch based off of this material if it's set to auto. Again, it's not used very often, but it can be if you buy a specific material for somebody. You know, you may say it's always cost-based except for this material for this one client type of thing. Not frequently used.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you.
No problem.
Can I ask another question about that also, Rob?
Certainly.
If you set it to auto and then set up each part as, you know, click that if you want area and leave it unclicked if you want it to stay cost, does it still allow you to change, like, have a choice on the pricing method, or will that be set as if you only do one?
No, it would default to
On auto?
auto, and then you could switch it. Yeah, but you could switch it from there back and
Switch,
forth.
then put it on auto?
Correct. And that's really just linking it to a single material. And if you have a place you want to do that and want to get into it, you may want to touch base with your point person, because this is going to work on all your primary products. It's not going to work on more of the advanced products that way. Any other questions in anything we've gone through so far?
I've got one more.
Sure.
When you set up a, for instance, a cutter, and what is the? Sometimes I see entries in the products window, the products tab. Other times I don't. Would you explain what that products window actually does?
When you say products window,
Okay. You
like
need
over
to
here?
call up a part for a cutter.
Okay, like an iCut?
Part. Yeah, I guess that would be fine. Yeah, let's see. Okay, and there's a products tab here to the left of the
Oh.
cutters tab. Why is there not anything in there? And it's
All right, there are two different ways of pulling parts on a product. One is from a list, and the other one is direct. A cutter is something you're selecting from a list, so therefore it doesn't need to be attached directly. What is attached directly is more in the labors, because you're never really selecting what labor belongs to it. It knows that. So if I look at my digital print cut labor and my print labor, you'll notice that print labor is tied to all of these products because we're not selecting it from a list, it's telling it. So when I do small format prints, it knows to always add print labor, and then this is how much labor to use because it's not something that's selected from a list. Most materials are selected from a list. This is generally used with labor in general. It can be used for anything. For example, if I wanted to, in my digital print, again, this is something wide format print, this is just the reverse of this tab, right? So my wide format print has all of these parts linked directly to it because none of them are used in a selection list. So my cut labor is only used when I'm doing some cutting, and then this is how much is used. You should probably never really have to work in any of this, but you can. If I always wanted to add an additional labor to every wide format print for a reason or something else I needed to always do, I can hit add here, go and pull in my material, and then I added my design labor. I want to always use it, or I can tell it by formula when I want to use it and then how much I want to use.
okay.
So what I just did is in my wide format print, it's always just going to add 10 minutes of design labor.
I see.
So you can link more things to existing products and vice versa. Most of what we've done up till now has all been in selection list, so not really dealing with this type of formula work.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Then we will speak tomorrow and we'll go through the accounting side of things and closing out. Until then, again, if you go to reports, financial reports, accounting reports, list, chart of accounts, you may want to print that out and give it to your bookkeeper and see if you can match them up with your accounting accounts. And if not, we'll need to work on that as well. We'll discuss that tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.